This is Andy Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred, and I'm delighted to be joined by David Diamante over Zoom. David, it's fight week.
It's fight week, man. Happy Halloween, Andy. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. It's good to see you too, David. Obviously, you're back in another bubble now. You've been in a few different ones. How's this one comparing to the others?
I tell you, this is like the Cadillac of bubbles, man. This is a nice bubble, man. I mean, the Hilton right here at Wembley. I've done a lot of fights at Wembley, both in the National Stadium and also the SSE Arena, which is where we are this weekend. And this hotel is great. They treat you great. The rooms are great. And Eddie set it up incredible. I mean, we've got a game room, a media room. We've got a movie room, incredible like restaurant area, outdoor area. The food is really good. So it's a great bubble, man. I'm excited. Everyone's here. Everyone's in a good mood. Fighters look primed. They're ready to go. We just finished the weigh-ins a little bit ago. So yeah, it looks like it's going to be a great night.
We know how tense things can get, especially when it's in such like a closed environment. Obviously I wasn't at fight camp, but I can imagine how tight that could have been at times. But compare kind of the atmosphere between, say, White Povetkin and then Usyk and Chisora. What would you say are the biggest comparisons in the two separate bubbles?
Well, they're very different. I mean, obviously the environment is extremely different. Out in Essex, it was the bubble situation was very different. Different hotel, different property. So it was just set up a little bit different, but I haven't seen any beefs here. People seem pretty mellow. Obviously the fighters are kind of on edge because they're raring to go, but I haven't seen any beef. Everything's been very smooth. So, but they're all different, right? All these bubbles are kind of different. I mean, we just did the one in Peterborough. We just did the one in Milton Keynes. Obviously, we did the 4 fight camps. So, kind of a veteran of the bubbles now. But yeah, it was really smooth. Popped in, got my COVID test. You lock down in your room till it comes back negative, and then obviously you're free to go. But everyone's been around, and I've been hanging out with a lot of the fighters today. With Usyk, with Dave Allen, with Darren Barker. I've seen all kinds of guys. Cambosos. I saw Lee Selby. Saw Hannah Rankin. Saw Savannah Marshall. So I've seen most. I've seen all the fighters who we did the weigh-in, but I've had a chance to kind of talk to them, and everyone seems to be in an upbeat mood.
We'll start working our way through the card, David, and just a couple of things away from it. And you mentioned Dave Allen there. Obviously, I saw Dave's Instagram post. He's no longer going to be fighting tomorrow night. Just kind of talk to me, David, about this past, say, 48 to 72 hours that you've kind of experienced with Dave Allen. Can you kind of draw any comparisons to any previous situations where a fight seems to be agreed, everybody's kind of checked in, and then all of a sudden, obviously, in this case, Don King's involved with Christopher Lovejoy, meaning that the fight needs to be renegotiated and terms couldn't be re-agreed?
Well, this has happened many times. I mean, fights fall through all the time. And I think this is one of the things that a lot of people don't know what a guy like Eddie Hearn or Frank Smith go through. There's a lot that needs to happen to put on a fight. And you got guys falling through for tons of different reasons. It might be a visa. It might be it could be a drug test. It could be, obviously you remember, we all remember what happened in New York with Jarrell Miller in the Anthony Joshua fight. But fights fall through all the time. I mean, that one was obviously on a very big level, but it happens on levels like this too. So it's pretty normal. And it's unfortunate, but it's kind of normal. And sometimes that's why you'll see promoters put an extra fight or two on a card because they figure a fight or two might fall through. It's very, very normal. So it happens. It's just the sport.
How sorry do you feel for Dave Allen? This would have been the first fight we'd have seen him with Jamie Moore in his corner as well. We've seen him have some brilliant sparring with Alexander Usyk in preparations for his fight with Derek Chisora as well. Dave, a brilliant character. How sorry and gutted are you for him?
Yeah, he's a great character, man. We all love Dave. He brings it, man. He's just the people's champ. Everybody loves the White Rhino from Conisbro. Look, it's tough. He's taken it really well. He's super mellow. And I think that he knows he'll be on a card very soon. So I'm sure he'll just continue to stay in shape and hopefully he'll be back in action sooner rather than later. So he seems to be taking it very well.
Moving on to some other fights on the card. We'll come to the headline fight last. We'll build into it, David. But Selby and George Cambosos Jr. Certainly for many over here, they may not know much about Cambosos Jr. But from what we've seen during fight week, he's been very assured and confident that he's coming here and he will be victorious. What should we expect in their bout, though, David?
I announced his first fight in America a number of years ago out in Connecticut, and it was like a first round knockout. But I think it's going to be a great fight, and the reason I say that is because, I mean, Selby, first of all, former world champ, and he always comes in shape, and he's tricky. Selby is tricky, and he's a warrior. He's got a warrior mentality. He doesn't give up. He's very slick, but ferocious Cambosos, he's younger. So a lot of people are kind of thinking that Selby is more on the downward trajectory of his career, getting a little long in the tooth. Well, that might be that. That also might not be. Okay. It really depends on how these guys perform. And speaking of, I mean, Cambosos is out there having all these tons of rounds with Manny Pacquiao. I mean, that might be a good thing. That also might not be a good thing, to get, who knows what's going on in those rounds. He might be taking a lot of shots, and that can be a lot of miles on you too. So I think it's going to be a good fight, but I think that there's so much at stake because the next step is obviously you become the mandatory for the kingpin at 135 right now, which is Teofimo Lopez. So there's a lot riding on this fight, and the world will be watching this fight.
We'll touch on the Loma-Lopez in my following question to this next one. But whoever does win on Saturday night between Selby and George Cambosos Jr., who do you think either of them could defeat or overcome Teofimo Lopez, especially on the back of what was such a phenomenal performance against Vasily Lomachenko?
Well, it's hard to speculate on a fight before the time comes because a lot can happen between now and then. You just don't know. But we all watched the fight, and Teofimo Lopez is hitting on all cylinders. So it'd be he's a tough outing for anybody, to answer your question. But can it happen? Yes, of course. It's boxing. Anyone can lose. People like to think these guys are superhuman, but they're human beings, and people can lose. And it's one of the hard things about boxing is that we're footballers and rugby players and basketball players and baseball players. They have all these different outings. There's a lot of different games. Boxing, man, you fight once, twice, 3 times a year, sometimes not. So you just have so little chances to show your wares. So we just don't know, but it's a tough ask. I'll tell you that.
We obviously might as well touch on it there. As I say, Teofimo Lopez with his victory over Vasily Lomachenko. Just reflect on that for me, David. It's about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now. As I said, a brilliant performance. Just what was your reflections on it there?
I thought it was a great fight. I really enjoyed watching it. Congratulations to Teofimo Lopez. I wasn't as surprised as a lot of people. If you watch the interviews that I talked about, some of them got edited, unfortunately, but I was talking about a lot of different things. First of all, let's just talk for a second I want to talk about what I saw in the fight. If you watch the Mikey Garcia Errol Spence fight, I likened the first part of the Lopez Loma fight to the Spence Garcia fight. And the reason why, this is what I saw. A lot of people have said, oh, Loma took too long to get started and this and that, and he had a bad game plan. And I disagree. I think Loma wanted to get started. He just couldn't. It was very similar. To me, Mikey Garcia and Errol Spence, talent-wise, I don't think there's a ton that separates them. I think they're both very, very high-level fighters. But the size difference, Mikey Garcia coming up from 135, passing 140, going to 147, taking on a really much bigger man at 147 who has, maybe close to equal skills. There's an old adage in boxing, a good big man beats a good small man. And that's what I saw in that fight. So when it came to Loma-Lopez, so Garcia, he was trying to get off, but he just couldn't because he knew he'd get sparked. Like Errol Spence was just too fast. He was too big. And Mikey Garcia wasn't able to open up. And that's what it looked like to me in the beginning of Loma-Lopez. You know, Lomachenko wanted to get off. I mean, in the second round, he got a little flurry in, but I think he vastly underestimated the speed of Teofimo Lopez. And I think everyone knew that Lopez had the power, but Lopez also has boxing skill, not just movement and lateral movement, but he does a lot of little things that maybe people don't see that are very difficult. And that's what was holding Loma back. It's not like Loma was just sitting there waiting. He wanted to do something. He was afraid. I think he was afraid he would get sparked. So, but I'm going to tell you this, Lomachenko is such a great fighter. He was able to find his way into the fight. It just happened in the second half of the fight. And he did take the second half of that fight. And at times there were spots where he actually really put the leather on Lopez, and Lopez did not look comfortable. I don't think Lopez was ever in any serious trouble, but there were certain moments in that fight where Teofimo Lopez did not look happy. He didn't look like he was enjoying. He was taking quite a bit of leather from Lomachenko. But then in the 12th round, you know, Lopez really dug deep and he won that round. And I thought it was pretty easy to score. I think I had it 116, 112 for Teofimo Lopez. It was a great performance. Obviously, we know Loma went and had surgery, but it was a great performance. And it's just one for the ages. And I think that there are still a lot of great fights out there. And I think that sorry about that.
That's all good.
You know, Devin Haney has the WBC belt, and I know everyone's saying this was an undisputed, but I mean, whether you want to say the franchise is or not, I mean, Devin Haney has the WBC belt, and I think Devin Haney poses a massive threat to Teofimo Lopez. I think that is the next amazing fight to happen down the line if we want to see that at 135. You know, I just think Devin Haney has the speed. He has the boxing IQ. He has the youth to give Lopez fits. I'm not saying he's going to win that fight. I don't know who would win that fight, but I think it is a great fight. I think Lopez probably has a little bit more power, but we've also seen Haney with some devastating knockouts. You know, I don't look at him as really like a one-punch knockout guy. He's more of an accumulation knockout guy, but he cracks. Devin Haney cracks. So he's got all the variables to make that a lovely fight. That fight, I hope, will happen.
David, just with Vasily Lomachenko, you mentioned obviously he's had surgery on his shoulder now. We know that in his recent fights, he certainly started to pick up more injuries over time. Do you feel that he could still be a force at super featherweight, or do you feel that maybe the injuries are starting to kind of take their toll on his body now?
Well, he just got out of surgery. So, and I've actually talked to his people even as early as today. So I'm not going to say too much, but what I can say is you never know till a guy throws a punch, right? You know, he might feel great, surgery might be great, and then he throws, you know, when you're actually, you know, he's got to rest, he's got to do PT, physical therapy, get back. But you never know how an injury heals until you're back in the ring. I will say that, you know, the orthopedic surgeons these days are incredible. I mean, you know, I had a horrible motorcycle accident. I shattered this arm and I'm doing pull-ups, push-ups. I feel great, but you just never know. So it's going to depend. But yeah, I mean, and it's also up to him and his heart. I think this was a very devastating loss. I think he was one step away of becoming undisputed, which is exactly what he wanted. And I think that's heartbreaking for him. So it's going to be interesting to see what moves he makes, but there's still tons of great fights. I mean, for me, at 126 and at 130, he's a monster. He's a monster. He's no Machenko. Sorry, people are calling me.
That's so good.
You know, I think at 126 and 130, Lomachenko is a monster. Because he's not, you know, what he did to go up to those weights was really amazing. But don't forget also when he fought Rigondeaux came up 2 weight classes to fight him. And everyone kind of, you know, shit on Rigondeaux's head. I didn't want to say it, but they were like, oh, Loma's so much better. But I mean, you know, you gotta, when guys go up like that, you gotta give them credit. I mean, you know, we saw Kell Brook do it with Triple G. We saw Mikey Garcia do it with Errol Spence. We see Loma do it with Lopez. I mean, to be great in a division that it's not your natural division, it can be very tough. So Lopez is still, I think Lomachenko is still a threat. I'll tell you a fight I would love to see is Shakur Stevenson and Lomachenko. If Lomachenko can rehab and feels great, if they can make that fight happen, whether it's at, I don't know, 126, 130, wherever they want to have it, I think that would be a phenomenal fight. But time will tell is the short answer to your question.
Just moving back to this Saturday's card over here in the UK, David. Tommy Mccarthy fighting for the European title. He's certainly had kind of a sharp rise over these past couple of years. What are you expecting in his bout for that title come Saturday night?
Yo, man, the Mac Attack from Belfast, Northern Ireland. I love Tommy McCarthy. He's trying to become Ireland's first black world champion. And, Godspeed to him. It's a tough ask because the cruiserweight division is a stacked division, and not just on the world level, but even on domestic. I mean, we're talking guys like Coley. We're talking guys like Reactpour. We're talking about guys like Chris Billum Smith. There are a lot, Juma. There's all kinds of great guys at cruiser. So, and we saw him, he has the 2 losses, he lost to Matty Askin and he lost to Richard Reactpour, but then he came back and he had that great win over Fabio Turchi in Italy. So, he's back and he's fighting Belal Lagoon. He's a Belgian fighter. And Belal, this could be a tough fight. Tommy McCarthy, we've seen him look different ways. He can be hot and he can be cold. So it kind of depends which Tommy Mac shows up. But I'm looking forward to a good fight right there. I think it's a good fight. I think Belal is a tough customer, and I think Tommy's going to have his hands full. Good fight.
Another fight, and the only world title fight on the card between Savannah Marshall and Hannah Rankin was meant to take place a few weeks ago. Everybody kind of excited now to see that one. There's certainly been kind of a back and forth between the pair of them in the build up to it. Peter Fury obviously back healthy now, boxing historian himself, somebody I'm sure you get on very well with. But what do you make of their fight?
I love this fight. I mean, I was gutted when, first of all, I was gutted to hear Peter Fury was sick. But I think he's better now, and I'm really happy about that, number one. So forget the fight. It's about health. So I'm really glad Peter Fury is feeling better. But now, speaking of the boxing, I mean, I was gutted that fight fell through. I mean, I can't wait for this fight. I think this is a great fight. And it's really hard for me to see either of these women taking a backward step. I think this is going to be a brutal, brutal fight. And it's really interesting. It's like, Rankin, obviously she had the IBO strap before, and Savannah Marshall, 2-time Olympian. She's undefeated, and this is her crack at it, from Hartlepool. I'm really excited to see what happens. I think this is a great fight. There's also been words back and forth, so there's no love lost there. It's Scotland v. England. I mean, there's just so many storylines in this fight, and obviously, women's boxing is buzzing right now. I mean, boxing in general is buzzing right now, but we've seen so much great women's boxing, and I think Marshall v. Rankin is a great fight. Cannot wait for it. I think it's going to be brutal.
And then we have both Ramla Ali and Amy Tomlinson in their own respective bouts as well. Just continues to kind of show the signs of the growth of female boxing across the sport, really. What have you made of certainly the rise of the sport from a female perspective?
Well, it just shows the popularity, and it's great, and we're seeing a lot of very competitive fights. We've seen that through Fight Camp. We've seen that outside of Fight Camp with McCaskill Brackhus. I mean, we've been seeing some great fights, and Katie Taylor, of course, and Terry Harper, and there's just all these rising stars in female boxing, and it's just wonderful. And again, the Timlin fight, and like you said, Ramla Ali. She's with 258 Management. She's making her pro debut. Obviously, great story there. From Mogadishu, Somalia. She lives in London, so she's making her pro debut. And then Timlin. And I think what I like about Amy Timlin is, like she's going for that vacant Commonwealth title, but I think she calls herself the real silent assassin. Or I'm sorry, the real babyface assassin. Silent assassin is Savannah Marshall, but she calls herself the real baby-faced assassin. And obviously we know many people have had that name over the years, but currently in British boxing, Shannon Courtney is called the baby-faced assassin. So she's calling herself the real baby. That's her nickname. So who knows? Maybe there's something brewing there, you know, and that could be a great fight. But women's boxing's buzzing right now, and we got 3 really exciting fights on this card. So looking forward to it.
Just moving on to the headline fight then, David. Obviously, Alexander Usyk versus Derek Chisora. Everybody loves a big heavyweight night and a big heavyweight fight to look forward to. As kind of we've edged closer to it, and you've seen yourself what Derek's been up to during the fight week, and we saw him with his Halloween paint on today.
Yes.
What do you make of kind of seeing that today from Derek, and we saw Alexander with his piece of paper and his notes yesterday? Is it all just mind games? Is it all just the pair of them trying to get a psychological edge?
It could be. I mean, you never know what's going through people's heads, especially Derek Chisora. You know, he's you never know with Derek Chisora, right? He's always entertaining. But as is Usyk, right? As is Usyk. I am very feel. To me, this fight, there are a lot of implications for this fight. There are a lot of important implications for the heavyweight division with this fight, and I think that's why it's captivated so many people's interest. I mean, obviously, we've seen what Alexander Usyk did to the cruiserweight division. He just destroyed it, and he did it in everyone's backyard. Although I will say, the Briedis fight in Latvia, I mean, I called that fight in Riga. That was a close fight. So, you know, Glavatsky and the Gassiev fight in Moscow, another fight that I called, he destroyed Gassiev. I mean, he was a boxing clinic, but not the Briedis fight. That was a very close fight. So he's obviously undefeated, Olympic gold medalist in the 2012 games. You know, people are trying to put him on the great all-time great list, which I think it's a little too early for that. I think Usyk's great, but we need to see where he is at 14 stone 4 pounds. We're just not sure. And, you know, Derek Chisora, we know who he is, right? We know who he is. And he brings it, and he's strong as a bull. And he's a fighter. And we've seen some spectacular knockouts. I mean, the knockout of Spielka, unreal. We've seen him get knocked out when Dillian White knocked him out terribly in their second fight. But it's going to be very interesting because this is kind of really the first real litmus test for Alexander Usyk at heavyweight. He fought Chaz Witherspoon in Chicago last year. I don't know if Chaz Witherspoon is on the same level as a Chisora. So I think this is a stiffer test. But I will say this. I mean, if you look at the fight, you know, obviously I'm calling it, so I'm not going to say who I think is going to win or lose, right? I don't do that. I stay neutral. But what I can do is look at some things. When you see how Chisora fought Caballel in Monaco, when you see how he fought Gashi at the O2 last April, he can have problems with guys that move a lot, and that's what Usyk is going to do. I mean, I don't know that, but I can pretty much tell you that's probably what he's going to do. He's going to box him. So the difference, though, is that he's going to be trying to win. He's not going to be just boxing. He's going to be trying to win the fight. He's not just going to be on his bicycle. So can Chisora land one of those big bombs? And if he does, how will Usyk fare? And it's a question that everyone wants to see, and that's why this fight is so interesting. But if Usyk comes through this, he is a big name in the heavyweight division. And, you know, we're obviously in the post-Klitschko era, and I love it because for so long, the heavyweight division was really under the stranglehold of the Klitschkos. And now, since they have left the game, we had this big 3-headed monster, right? With Joshua, Fury, and Wilder. Now that Wilder is nixed out of that, and now it's a 2-headed monster. So now it's really Joshua and Fury at the top, and that's the fight that everybody wants to see. But you cannot overlook a guy like Alexander Usyk because he's in the mix. I mean, he's just starting to be in the mix, but he's in the mix. I don't think he's at that level yet because we haven't seen him at that level. But there are a lot of great names in the heavyweight division, and I think there are guys that could give him trouble, or that would be really great fights to see Alexander Usyk in against. Guys that move really well, guys that have faster hand speed. So it's a very interesting fight. I can't wait to see it. It's there's been a lot of, like you said, gamesmanship with the war paint, and then the Usyk with his notes at the weigh-in. But it's a very interesting fight. I cannot wait to be there and to call it and to see what happens. It's going to be a very interesting fight. You can't blink, because anything could happen.
If Alexander is victorious, David, where would you rank him in, say, the world heavyweight rankings?
It's I think that there are a lot of guys out there that are tough. I mean, you got guys like Parker. You still got guys like Andy Ruiz. You got guys like Michael Hunter that are maybe not. These guys are maybe not all at the very top of the division, but they're still there, right? And all those guys move well and they're durable. They can punch, and they've got hand speed. They have boxing IQ. All those fights could be very interesting dance partners for Usyk in the future. How he would fare against Joshua or Fury, I just don't know, because those are big guys. And that's one of the really big questions that we're going to see tomorrow is, how does Usyk do at 14 stone, 4 pounds? How does he do in the heavyweight division? We'll see.
Just moving forwards, David, just one other topic, a couple of other topics I want to quickly touch on. In the night over here, times which you're a bit more familiar with if you was back home, we see Gervonta Davis and Leo Santa Cruz compete for 2 world titles across 2 different divisions. But what do you make of their clash, David?
It's a nice fight. I like the fight. I definitely am going to watch the fight. Definitely a fan of Gervonta Davis. Definitely a fan of Leo Santa Cruz. Again, it's a guy coming up in the division, so I think that definitely Gervonta is the favorite. Maybe because of the size, also because Leo. Many people feel like he's getting a little bit older now, got a lot of mileage. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting fight. I mean, Leo Santa Cruz. We've all seen the Frampton fights. We know that he has massive punch output. He's an absolute warrior. Looking forward to a good fight. And I think that Gervonta Davis is one of those names at 135 that you can't ignore. I mean, I wish they put him against some of these guys, but look, I'm not going to complain. We just had Loma-Lopez, which was just amazing. We also have Garcia Campbell coming up, which I just love that fight. I mean, Ryan Garcia, Luke Campbell is a hell of a fight. Make no mistake, that's a great fight. I cannot wait for that fight. So there's some, and of course I was talking about Devin Haney earlier. So there's so many great fights in that division. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I want to see the fight. It should be a good fight.
Final thing, David, before I let you go, we haven't had a chance to kind of catch up over it yet, but obviously we found out that the Wilder Fury 3 trilogy bout, it won't be taking place now. What was your reaction to it, and who would you like to see Tyson Fury step in the ring with on his new date where he's looking at December 5th?
I'll give you 3 guesses. Come on, man. That's the easiest question ever. Who we all want to see. Andy, I know you want to see it too. I mean, we all want to see Joshua v. Fury. We all want to see it. The world wants that fight. The world wants that fight. Let's make that fight. Look, it's not a gimme because Joshua has to get past Kubrat Pulev, the tough Bulgarian, and Tyson Fury is going to have another fight before. If the fight happens, Tyson Fury is going to have another fight. We don't know who he's going to dance with. So both guys have to get past their next fights for that to happen, and then the negotiations have to happen. So there's still a lot of hurdles, but I am tentatively optimistic. I tend to be an optimist. I think that the public is who makes the fights, and the public wants this fight. This fight has to happen. So I don't know what's going on with Wilder. I don't think you can count him out. I think he's still up there in the division. I think sometimes a loss like this can be sometimes the best thing that happens to you because it can wake you up. I mean, if you look at him against Luis Ortiz, I mean, he lost every second of that fight until he chinned Ortiz. And sometimes you can fall in love with your power, and it's a very dangerous thing for a fighter. I mean, that's one of the beefs that I kind of have with Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis is an incredible boxer, make no mistake about it. But I feel like sometimes he doesn't even want to do it because he just thinks he's going to spark his guy. And usually he does, which is great. But what happens when you get that guy that's just got a real beard like me, or a good set of whiskers, a concrete chin that can't be stopped? That happens. And then then you have to get to your boxing. So I'm always kind of a fan of like, if the knockout comes, it comes, but you got to stay behind your boxing. And it seems that Wilder has kind of forgotten that in some of his last fights. And I think he's paid the price for it. Well, maybe now he's going back to the drawing board. He's reinventing himself. There's no doubt he's a warrior. There's no doubt he's got dynamite in his gloves. Let's not forget about that. Okay. Let's not forget about that. So, but I think he's still there. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. But as far as that fight falling out, maybe that's good, because I would really love it to pave the way for Joshua v. Fury. And then if Wilder comes back and he wants to fight either one, whoever won that, it's going to be for an undisputed, and that'd be great.
David, we will leave that there, and we'll leave you now to enjoy the rest of your evening. Hopefully I'll see you in person soon so we can do another interview. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you, David. Obviously, stay safe, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks. Speak to Boxing Social.
Thank you so much, Andy. Take care and happy Halloween. The Fright starts now.